count as science fiction literature?
No, it does. I know it's won all these like awards and stuff. Yes.
Like, I mean,
you've got to take this out. You got to cut this out because that makes me sound really dumb. I'm Melissa.
I'm Taylor.
And this is our Cinema Romance. I want to thank everyone for watching today. If you are watching for the first time, hello. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe. Leave comments. We love listening to comments. For those of you returning, thank you for returning.
Thank you
so
much.
Very nice. We appreciate it. What are we talking about today?
So last week we talked about what happens in the second act of The Thing.
Okay. And
in the course of that, I think you asked, like, do we think of this as science fiction or horror? And I brought up a definition that I often use as sort of shorthand for science fiction horror. Basically, science fiction has to explain what's going on, whereas horror doesn't. And based on that definition, The Thing would properly be classified science fiction. But here's the thing, I don't think it's a science fiction movie, it's a horror movie. It is a body horror movie. The same thing came up with The Fly. According to that definition, The Fly would properly be science fiction. But it's not a science fiction movie. So I thought it would be a good idea for us to talk about science fiction, horror, what's the difference, and the movie we picked as a jumping off point...
Alien.
Yes. Alien, 1979, directed by Ridley Scott. There is, I think, sort of, or there at least has been maybe an ongoing debate about how to classify Alien.
Yes. And what's interesting is I see so many best of horror lists listing Alien as number 1, which I think is very interesting.
I don't usually do, I guess, really any research beyond watching a movie. But I did look up just the broad definitions for science fiction, horror, and fantasy on Wikipedia. And there is a lot of crossover between these genres. The big things that differentiate, well, like fantasy includes magic.
Okay.
Something fantastical, and while there might be frightening elements, the goal is you're not trying to frighten someone when you're telling a fantasy story. That is the goal of horror, is to, at least according to Wikipedia, to frighten or repulse. It's meant to have this, like, very visceral reaction to something scary or threatening or gory.
Yeah.
And science fiction includes scientific elements or some kind of scientific foundation and is usually trying to comment on, like, the way that science or technology might be used in the future. If you've ever seen an episode of Black Mirror,
I was about to bring up Black Mirror. I was about to say, what about Black Mirror?
Is very literally science fiction. As scary as, like, some episodes definitely are. And before we go any further, spoiler alert, but, like, if you're watching this channel and you haven't seen Alien, I mean, you must be related to one of us, and thank you for watching. But I'm going to assume that most people who stumble upon this video have seen Alien.
Yeah.
And they know what happens.
Yeah.
But Melissa, Alien, science fiction or horror?
Science fiction?
I mean, yeah.
I'm sorry. Honestly, this one is really, really hard. I'm not asking you. I think I could argue with myself in a paper on this, because they do explain a lot. Like, even when they're doing an autopsy on the creature, like, they're talking about so many detailed things. but it's a terrifying movie. It's terrifying.
I mean, okay.
Like, so, in that case, like, probably horror.
I personally think that Alien is a horror movie. Now, I read many years ago, a relative had given me a subscription to Film Comment. You know what Film Comment is?
It's a very good magazine.
Yeah, it's. I did look this up. It's been around since 1962.
Oh.
There's still, I think it's primarily online now. I think there's some sort of a newsletter that might go out, but it's primarily a podcast and a website. I remember it was an article in Film Comment that talked about Alien as a science fiction movie, and I'm going to tell you how they broke it down, but before I do, like most movies that we call science fiction are not science fiction. They are genre movies set in the future. That is not science fiction.
We discussed this before, but going back to Blade Runner, also directed by Ridley Scott, written by Philip K. Dick, who I would say...
The original story. No, yeah, Philip K. Dick, absolutely science fiction author.
However, the movie feels like a noir...
It is.
It
is a detective story set in the future.
Yeah.
Star Wars is not science fiction. Star Wars is... Star Wars has a lot of Western elements. And I'm not talking about, like, geographically Western.
Yeah,
I'm talking about the genre. And then Star Wars has magic.
Yeah.
Star Wars is,
fantasy?
Really properly fantasy. There are not that many, like, true science fiction movies. Solaris is definitely one. And we're talking about the Tarkovsky.
Yes.
I don't remember the Soderbergh. I know I watched it. It felt like it was about 6.5 years long. But other than that, I don't know that I could tell you one thing that happens in it. Other than what I know about the story from having seen Tarkovsky's.
Yes.
2001.
Yes.
Is properly science fiction. Yeah. A movie that came out, I think it was last year, that we want to talk about soon, Artifice Girl. That is science fiction.
Yeah.
And the sort of delineation in my mind is, like, is there a question about the future or about science, about the capabilities of science that the movie is trying to answer?
Other can they survive? I would probably say no.
That's, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think, and even Blade Runner, while the movie is, from a genre perspective, it is a detective story set in the future. It still does ask questions about humanity. These are androids, the replicants.
Yeah.
What do they have? Humanity? Do they have value as something living? Like, the movie does grapple with these questions. Alien doesn't do any of that. Here's how Film Comment approached it. They said, and I will not remember most of this. When I read it, I did not understand most of it. But there were like 4 quadrants. It was human, represented by the people.
Yeah.
Non-human, which I think was represented by the computer. Anti-human, which was the alien or the xenomorph. And then anti-non-human, which was the cat.
What would...
Okay. Here's, all right.
Okay.
A couple of things. First of all, and I am speaking only for myself now.
I would have to... Now I want to go read this article.
my first reaction when I hear things like that is like, whatever. Like, I'm sorry to be that way, but are you kidding me? Like, this is a movie about a space monster. Like, I appreciate that you're like breaking it down in this like just inaccessibly like intellectual way, but that's not why I'm watching this movie. But here's what I think makes Alien an interesting case, because it is true that there are a limited number of, I guess, what you might think of as like sentient beings or like intelligence of some kind, entities in the movie. You've got people, you've got the alien, you've got the cat, you've got the computer, and you've got
The android.
the android. Thank you. My question at that point, is there anything in Alien that invites that kind of analysis?
Not that I can think of. I feel like I would have to be searching for something. Like, I would have to have a question before that somebody said, okay, you need to apply that question to Alien in order for me to look for something like that. There are other thematic things that come up in Alien that are things that I have picked up on. Like, I think Ash, who is the android, acts incredibly misogynistic. But what's interesting is most of his interactions are with Ripley. So is he misogynistic, or is he just a misanthrope? Like, does he just not like humans? You know, like, that's something that's an interesting question.
Yeah, I agree that it's an interesting question, and I don't think that it is that he just doesn't like humans. I don't know if maybe he doesn't like Ripley specifically, but he does, like, he throws shade and attitude at her all the time.
Well, the strangest thing about him being an android is how he treats her, because he treats her like a threatened man treats a woman that is trying to bring up a valid point.
And, well, I mean, somebody programmed him.
Yeah.
But, well,
no, that's true.
I mean, the point being is, if we have androids someday, and I am becoming increasingly convinced that that day is much farther in the future than a lot of people today realize, if that day comes at all. But if we ever do have androids, they will be programmed by someone.
Yeah.
And we already see, and these are the kinds of questions that Black Mirror likes to ask.
Yeah.
Is how technology will, like, something that is ostensibly created, developed to benefit human beings, ends up, like, actually undermining us or working against us or hurting us in some way. And we've seen some real world examples of this. For example, facial recognition software that is being deployed in lots of places that you might not realize. But where it is already causing problems, facial recognition does not know how to deal with something other than white skin. They are constantly having to fine-tune this technology because
the people that created it
are white. They're using white subjects to test it, to fine-tune it. So that is already a real-world example of the unforeseen consequences of just the process of developing this technology. So you will never convince me that when we do have artificial intelligence, if that day ever actually comes, that artificial intelligence will not reflect the history and biases and everything of the people who developed it.
Yeah.
So, could Ash be misogynistic? Absolutely. And the one that stands out to me the most, when he develops the motion tracker, and she says, "What does it key off of?" a perfectly reasonable question. And he says, micro changes in air density. Like,
oh, yeah, no, he's just so rude to her. Like, again, the most shocking thing about the, like, whole, like, he's an android is like, oh, really? I just thought he was, like,
I just thought he was a jerk.
Yeah, no, like, man, to having been said that, Ian Holmes' performance,
he's
so
something else.
good.
I ended up, you asked like how early this was in his career. I ended up not looking that up. I don't know, but to the extent that this movie helped him break out, it makes sense. When before he is full on malfunctioned and started like spinning off the walls, he's doing this thing with his eyes where they're not blinking, but they're just sort of fluttering in this weird way that, I mean, it looks like something breaking. It looks like some loop has gotten stuck.
Yeah, no, I mean, when you watch that performance and then think, really, this guy's gonna be Bilbo Baggins one day? It's like, no, what? Like, no, it's quite a performance.
So there's one shot that I think does, like, maybe if you squint your eyes, you could say that it does invite the kind of analysis that film comment engaged in. And it's the shot of the alien looking at the cat in its carrier. Because it looks, and there's just a little bit of like, you know, a head tilt, like it's trying to understand this thing.
Yeah.
That's a pretty weak point upon which to hang that kind of like, so it's shot like a horror movie. There are POV shots. It has a monster at its center. I asked you when we watched this again the other day, during the opening of the movie, it's just a lot of these long sort of dolly shots through the ship with no humans present. And I was like, what POV do you think this is? And
I said the ship.
I have seen analysis that that's meant to represent like some sort of a presence on the ship.
Like a ghost?
Yes. Not that the audience will ever think that they're watching a ghost story, but just because they haven't seen any people.
Yeah.
It's clearly empty. Everything's mostly dark.
Yeah.
So it's meant to invoke some sense of anxiety.
Well, what's interesting is the ship, I think, does, I mean, they call it Mother. There's certainly a sense that the ship, sometimes it feels like the ship is working with them, and sometimes the ship is working against them. And when they're talking to Mother, it's not like, Mother's like the root, like it's the computer that helps run the ship, like, that does everything, right? But there's
like when they go into the room to actually communicate with the ship, it is like they're stepping inside a brain or something.
And all the lights, the electrical impulses, you know, like I think that's supposed to like signify a brain, right? Like all the lights and stuff. Yeah.
Which,
even though it kind of looks like a light bright, like it looks a little bit like everything else in the movie is so gorgeous, but inside the mother chamber with all those little tiny white Christmas lights, like there is a sense though when it's kind of panning around the ship that we're going into this spot, like we're looking around the corner and like, what is that? I do feel like the ship has a personality, and not so much a presence as I feel like the ship is showing us like, I'm waking the people up now. Like it is interesting. I do think there's a perspective, but I don't so much see it as like just it's it's, to me it's the ship, and I buy that.
And what's interesting there to me is the idea of the ship having a personality, having a role in this story. Certainly the idea that this room, it's almost like you're stepping into the ship's mind. Like,
Yeah.
these are science fiction concepts.
Yeah.
I mean, going back to the alien looking at the cat, that's, if I had directed Alien and that were not in the script, and I don't know if it's in the script or not, like, I can certainly see me on set thinking, hey, we should get a shot of the alien looking at the cat.
Yeah.
Not because I'm inviting some intellectual analysis of it, but just because it would be cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let's have the alien see the cat. And we're not going to talk about the sequels, even though, I mean, I don't think I'm going out on a limb to say that you prefer Alien to Aliens.
Yes. We have this conversation
Periodically.
Periodically. I think they are both phenomenal movies, like really, really excellent films. I prefer Alien.
And I prefer Aliens. But here's the thing. Aliens is not horror. Like, it's very tense.
Yeah.
It's so tense at times. But it is not a horror movie, nor do I think it's a science fiction movie. It is, I mean, really, it's a war movie set in the future in space.
Yeah.
That's it. I'm sure there are, like, really in-depth intellectual, like, analyses of aliens that I could seek out and find. But, I mean, if Film Comment was maybe reaching with their analysis of Alien, like, come on.
Yeah.
Aliens is an action movie. It's one of the best. But that's what it is. So, like, what have we learned today?
We've learned that despite all of the sci-fi elements, we both agree that Alien is a horror movie.
Yes. So there is a lot more that could be said about genres. I mean, there's not just, sci-fi horror. We could talk about like horror versus thriller. Where is the delineation there? There is a lot that we can say. There's also a lot more that we can say about the movie Alien, because while we agree that it's horror, there is a lot thematically that we have not touched upon. But I think that's it for today.
Yes.
So thank you for watching.
Thank you.
Please do jump in. If you have an opinion about alien, science fiction, or horror, let us know. Like and subscribe. But for now, I'm Taylor.
I'm Melissa.
This is our Cinema Romance.
Bye.